Good morning. My name is Mona Boaz, and I'll be sharing our paper, Mapping Nutrition Intake Among Homeless Young People in Jerusalem. I'm sharing on behalf of my colleagues, Ms. Shira Shapira, Dr. Hagit Salem, and Professor Vered Kaufman-Shriki. All of us are from the Nutrition Sciences Department at Ariel University in Israel. In Israel, there are approximately 3,900 individuals aged 18 or older who are classed as homeless, according to the Israel Ministry of Social Welfare and Social Affairs, as reported to the OECD. Homelessness, as you know, is associated with increased risk of food insecurity. Associations between homelessness, food insecurity, and adverse nutrition and health outcomes have been reported in several countries. The objectives of our study were to measure the extent to which reported food consumption by the homeless young people aligns with nutrition recommendations of the Israel Ministry of Health. And also, we hope to map the dietary intake of homeless young adults living in out-of-home housing solutions in Jerusalem. For this cross-sectional study, participants were recruited from a convenient sample of men and women aged 18 to 26 years living in one of the 40 out-of-home housing solutions in Jerusalem during the data acquisition period, which was February to June 2024. Included individuals had to have lived in their current housing solution for more than 7 days and provide signed informed consent. Excluded were individuals who were not their own legal guardian or who did not wish to participate. Dietary intake was measured with the Israel Ministry of Health's dietitian-administered multipass 24-hour recall. Nutrient intake was analyzed on NutriRatio software, which is an indigenous Israeli program appropriate for Israeli diets. We used structured interview to ascertain socio-demographic data. Body mass index and ideal body weight were calculated, and data was analyzed on SPSS version 29. These are the population characteristics. By design, the population was young. We found them to be between about 22 and a half years of age. They left home before the age of 17. They were a bit above their ideal body weight at 109%. 67% were smokers, and their BMI was 23.8, which is in the normal range. Half of the participants were female and half were male, and 76.7% currently lived in a hostel setting rather than in a shelter. The population reported performing 119 minutes a week of physical activity, which is quite a bit lower than the 150 minutes a week recommended by the Israel Ministry of Health. First, we looked at macronutrient intake, and we can see here that the recommended intake of energy is between 25 and 30 calories per kilogram of ideal body weight, but our population was consuming 36.7 calories per kilogram of body weight, and that's significantly more. We also see that protein intake, which is recommended at 0.8 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight, was being consumed, in fact, at 1.5 grams per kilogram. Again, that is significantly greater than recommended. The percent of calories consumed as fat is recommended to be 30%, but our population was consuming more than 40% as fat, again, significantly greater. And the amount of calories consumed as saturated fat is recommended to be not more than 6% by the Israel Ministry of Health, but our population was consuming more than 10% as saturated fat. Again, this is significantly greater than recommended. You can see here these significant values. We also looked at vitamin intake. The following vitamins were consumed in amounts greater than recommended by the Israel Ministry of Health, and this includes vitamin A, vitamin B2, which is riboflavin, but that was in men only. Similarly, vitamin B3, which is niacin, also greater in men only, and vitamin B6, which was greater in both men and women. Vitamins with intake below recommended levels included folic acid in men only and vitamin K in both men and women. Vitamins B12, C, D, and E were consumed at levels consistent with recommended levels. Regarding minerals, we found that the following minerals were consumed at levels less than recommended. That includes calcium, copper, and iron, but in women only, and minerals with intake greater than recommended levels included phosphorus, sodium, iron in men only, and selenium. The minerals magnesium, potassium, manganese, and zinc were consumed at levels consistent with recommendations. To summarize our findings, we find a pattern of excess energy and macronutrient intake. Participants were consuming more, significantly more than the higher level of recommended energy intake, and this may indicate a trajectory toward weight gain and increased risk of overweight or obesity later in adulthood. Vitamin and mineral intake patterns were not consistent with recommendations overall and reflect a reliance on fortified and ultra-processed foods. Together, this dietary intake pattern increases risk for overweight and obesity, metabolic dysregulation, reproductive problems, osteoporosis, and cardiovascular disease later in life. The study had several strengths and limitations. The strengths include that we used standardized validated data intake methods. Dietary intake was performed by a registered dietitian familiar with the population, and the study was adequately powered to detect the outcomes it detected. Study limitations include its cross-sectional design, which precludes any discussion of causality. We used a single 24-hour dietary intake interview, which is somewhat suboptimal, but also unavoidable given that we were working in a homeless population. And finally, the sample size was small, though apparently adequately powered, and we relied on a convenient sample, again, unavoidable in homeless populations. In conclusion, the dietary intake of young homeless adults living in temporary housing solutions in Jerusalem is not consistent with dietary guidelines or optimal health outcomes. What can we do? Food providers can increase access to fresh fruits, vegetables, and dairy products while reducing reliance on ultra-processed foods. Nutrition education programs tailored to homeless young adults may promote healthier food choices. And government agencies should develop policy to ensure the enhanced nutritional quality of food provided to shelter and hostels. Thank you very much.